Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Welcome to this webinar on behalf of Fundación ONCE, the Disability Hub Europe, and GRI. My name is Thijs Reuter. I'm Head of Policy with GRI, and I'm thrilled to open this webinar with you. We have about 800 registrations, of which many have joined already. We're now at 250. Little bit over that, so great to have so many people online today with us. And I would like to ask to put on the first slide of some technical details that I would briefly share with you. We will use the Q&A function of the Zoom for the questions throughout the whole session, and this Q&A function will be followed by our team. And you can also upvote a question that you like, so that it will be visible for us that a lot of people share that same question. So please use that for questions, the Q&A. The chat function is for technical issues only. Next, please. And there will be closed captioning, so you can see in the bottom of your screen CC live transcript button to start that or to stop it. And we also have sign language interpreters, and we will activate also a side-by-side function. Next, please. That you can adjust to make the one part of the screen a little bit bigger, and you can also select speak if you're a gallery view if you don't don't follow the sign language interpreter yourself. So please use that functionalities, and if that kind of things raise questions, please use the chat for that. But the Q&A for questions regarding the content of the webinar. A recording will be made available at the end of next week. So the session will be recorded. You can access it end of next week. I'm giving the floor now for the real official start of this webinar. And thanks again all for joining on behalf of Fundación ONCE, the D-Hub, and GRI. Maria Tusi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Thijs. Welcome all of you to this seminar. I do really hope that you and your families are well. I would like to thank GRI for co-organizing this event in the framework of the Disability Hub Europe, an initiative led by Fundación ONCE with the co-founding of the European Social Fund. I would also like to recognize the commitment of GRI towards the inclusion of people with disabilities, and our alliance for more than 8 years now, and its role as a main partner of the D-Hub network. I would like to thank all the participants and speakers representing different relevant stakeholders, the European Commission, leading business, and civil society. It is really amazing that almost 900 people are registered to follow this seminar. Thank you very much to all of you. A very brief presentation of Fundación ONCE. It is a foundation founded in 1988 by ONCE, the national organization of the blind in Spain. It is based in Madrid, and our mission is to promote equal opportunities for people with disabilities through training and employment as the best ways for social inclusion, and also universal design and accessibility of products, services, and environments. We also appreciate very much the role of the ESF and our alliance also with the European Union as an instrument to promote social and labor inclusion of people with disabilities all over the European Union, and particularly to support, as I said before, Disability Hub Europe. To finish, I would like to say the need to promote an and inclusive recovery that leaves no one behind, including the 100 million people with disabilities in the European Union and more than 1 billion people in the world. So just to finish, thank you very much again. And now I will give the floor to Carla Bonino, CSR and Sustainability Head of Unit at Fundación ONCE. Thank you, Carla, my colleague, and also Disability Hub coordinator. Carla will present the agenda we have ahead and will make herself also a brief introduction to the hub and the coming sessions. So I hope we have an inspiring event, and thank you very much again. Carla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Thais. Yes, I will walk you briefly through the agenda that we have today. If we can go to the next slide, please. After this welcome and introduction, we will go to the presentation of the study on non-financial information and disability reporting in the EU, an in-depth analysis of the Spanish case. This will be conducted by Teresa Arroyo, the team leader of Disability Hub Europe Technical Secretariat. Then we will go to the first discussion conducted by Thais Routen, head policy of GRI. And this will be progress towards an inclusive non-financial reporting framework, current developments and trends. Then we will have some minutes for Q&A, and we will jump to the second session, the second roundtable, promoting inclusive organizations, challenges and opportunities, with some minutes for Q&A and then the closing. During the two roundtables, we will count, as Maria was saying, with different stakeholders representing the European Commission and some civil society and concrete businesses, leading businesses. I will just like to give a short introduction to Disability Hub Europe as the umbrella initiative that gives place to this webinar co-hosted with GRI. Disability Hub Europe is led by the ONCE Foundation and co-funded by the European Social Fund, as Maria was saying. It is a multi-stakeholder engagement initiative aimed at working on the potential of the binomial disability and sustainability. It is running since 2018 and will be operating until 2023. The final goal is to foster social and labor inclusion of people with disabilities in Europe while promoting inclusive and sustainable businesses. In the end, we seek to contribute to an inclusive economy and now to an inclusive recovery. And we count with 7 reference partners, being them CSR Europe, GRI, of course, with whom we promote this webinar today, the ILO Global Business and Disability Network, the European Forum on European Disability Forum, participating as well in this webinar, L'Oreal, also present too, and just to finish, to share that Disability Hub Europe is aligned with the 2030 agenda and the SDG, especially SDG 8, 10, and 17. And if we can go to the next slide, please. One idea that I would like to share about Disability Hub Europe is that we work around this pillar that we call Disability 360 approach in order to encourage more inclusive businesses. What this means is that we understand people with disabilities as stakeholders, but in a broad sense, meaning that they can be employees, consumers, together with their families, they can be suppliers, they can be employers, and of course, members of the community. We believe this very much widens the perspective that businesses can take towards promoting a more inclusive practices. Now, if we ask why we take a look, why we're interested in non-financial reporting or non-financial information linked to disability, on the one hand, we believe that we've seen an increasing importance of disability in CSR and sustainability agendas, human rights agendas, inclusion and diversity agendas during the last 10 years. And this is a very important way, a very important development towards making businesses more inclusive. This has been more and more present in the companies and in the public agendas. And on the other hand, from the beginning of the transparency practices through sustainability and non-financial reporting being in place, we believe that they have a potential not only to encourage transparency by organizations, but also indirectly to make them more sustainable in practice, in this case, by being more disability inclusive. So I think this webinar is very, very timely. We have the revision of the non-financial reporting directive in place, also probably European standards on non-financial reporting. So we have here the opportunity to help businesses to be more inclusive and more diverse. And with no more delay, I will give the floor to Teresa Arroyo, who will present the study we have developed from Fundación ONCE with the support of KPMG, called Non-Financial Information and Disability Reporting in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. It is my pleasure to be here. Good morning, everyone. Well, this is the report that we want to present today. As you can see in the screen, the Non-Financial Information and Disability Reporting in the European Union, which is a study carried out under the framework of Disability Hub Europe, a project led by Fundación ONCE and co-funded by the European Social Fund. And it includes, as Carla said, a special chapter devoted to the Spanish case of the transposition of the Non-Financial Reporting Directive. What is the background of this report? As all of you know, the directive on the disclosure of non-financial and diversity information aims at promoting business transparency as regards sustainability. The EU member states have transposed the directive into their national laws and therefore have established a national framework for businesses on the disclosure of environmental, social, employee-related matters, human rights, anti-corruption and bribery. But what is the impact of this directive on transparency about disability? You will see that the main findings of this study underline the importance of including explicit disability indicators and metrics in regulatory frameworks, as this can help companies to effectively measure, report, and follow up on this. This publication can also serve as a driver to basically boost the diversity and inclusion strategies of companies and align them to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as Carlos mentioned, which specifically refers to people with disabilities, as you know, remember, who amount to 100 million citizens in the EU and 1 billion around the world of people with disabilities. And of course, to promote a more inclusive economy that leaves no one behind. Well, the structure of this report contains a European approach, as you will see, to disability and non-financial information. Then you will find about the methodology of the study, which is based on the translation and analysis of the transposition in the EU countries and research of more than 200 reports of companies. For example, as an analysis of disability reporting in Spain, the Law 11/2018, disability in CSR, sustainability and non-financial information reports, and we will check the disability in corporate governance reports. And this is an action-oriented report, so therefore you will see at the end of the document a roadmap for different stakeholders and recommendations. Well, how do we see the European approach to disability and non-financial information? Well, although disability and accessibility are currently considered part of the sustainability, diversity and human rights agendas, as all of you know, the Non-Financial Reporting Directive has only considered diversity from a broad perspective, without explicitly mentioning disability. However, you know that the non-binding European Commission guidelines of 2017, following the directive, did include disability as part of the social and employee matters that need to be disclosed. One of the main milestones, as you can see in the screen, is the launch of the Guide of Disability Sustainability Reporting that was published in 2015 by GRI and Fundación ONCE and co-funded by the European Social Fund. And in 2019, this Guide on Disability and Sustainability Reporting was updated to reflect GRI's transition from the G4 guidelines to the sustainability reporting standards, as well as to include the latest leading regarding Disability 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, you know that the Non-Financial Reporting Directive is going to be reviewed, which is an opportunity to include specific references to disability. It is important to highlight as well that the inclusion of disability in the non-financial reporting agendas is also aligned with the European Union strategy for corporate social responsibility and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, among others. Well, regarding the methodology of the study, this publication aims to analyze the inclusion of disability, as you know, in corporate reporting as a result of the transpositions of the non-financial reporting directive in each of the member states of the EU. Furthermore, this report aims to address disability reporting in Spain from a wider perspective, since it is one of the most advanced transpositions in terms of disability reporting. For this second part of the document and to be able to compare the situation before and after the law, in total 235 reports were analyzed. This includes sustainability and CSR reports, non-financial information statements, and corporate governance reports that goes from 2017 to 2019. Looking more in depth, the analysis on the national transpositions of the 27 EU members to identify the inclusion of disability and or diversity, we can conclude that most national transpositions of the directive in the EU member states have followed the same path by including just the general term diversity. However, in Spain and France, they included specific indicators related to disability in their national transpositions. Therefore, they are the only two EU countries which have gone beyond the directive. In a further analysis, it was found that Italy and Romania have incorporated non-discrimination, diversity-related metrics, and some other indicators into their national transpositions. Well, regarding the case of Spain, years ago, already the most advanced Spanish companies voluntarily reported their commitment to disability disclosures through sustainability reports, and today, the companies with more than 500 employees, as you know, have been required to report on the integration of diversity, including disability, through non-financial information statements. The impact of the law has been particularly visible, as you can see in the graph, in 2019, when 100% of the IBEX 35 companies reported on the total number of employees, and more than 90% of companies reported on their commitment to disability benefits and actions for employees or social initiatives and volunteering. Although there is a visible increase in companies reporting on universal accessibility, we think that there is still room for improvement, since this indicator is an explicit mandatory requirement of the regulation. Looking to additional indicators, as you can see in this picture, in the graph, it is notable to say that, for example, commitment to disability, social initiatives and corporate volunteering, considering that the initial figure was high, there has not been a significant variation. But it is remarkable that for products and services indicator show a relevant increase in the company's commitment, that basically what they do is to report on design for all, universal design, and consideration of those products and services designed for people with disabilities. And we can see a sharper increase in the benefits and actions for employees. However, we observed that the extension of disability inclusion commitment to the supply chain show an increase in 2018, but not for 2019. The most common practices were basically the acknowledgement of the best performing suppliers in terms of disability. Now in this slide, we will focus on the corporate governance reports. What is the minimum content that is required in Spain for this kind of reports? Well, we have a Royal Decree Law in 2017, and then the transposition of the Non-Financial Reporting Directive modified an article in the Spanish Companies Act. This requires basically listed companies to include a description in their governance reports of the diversity policy applied to their board of directors, and to indicate whether the diversity policy addresses issues such as training and professional experience, age, disability, gender, to the management board and the committees. In this graph, we see is an increase of companies included at board reports, and we can see that this is good news as well. Well, the review of the Non-Financial Reporting Directive and the drafting of a European reporting standard are key steps to ensure a more comprehensive approach to diversity, and therefore a major opportunity to include explicit references to disability. As the analysis of the Spanish case shows, as we have just seen, the inclusion of disability in binding and non-financial regulations not only fosters transparency on how companies report on disability-related issues, but also indirectly enhance more disability-inclusive business performance. Some of the best practices identified in the report, and you will see them, include ensuring the representation of diverse talent, leadership, accountability, and capabilities for diversity and inclusion. Well, and as this is an action-oriented report, you will find specific measures to be considered by the stakeholders that goes from improving reporting, disaggregation of data, statistics are really important for that. Developing guidance tools, knowing from the best practices and build from there, from the knowledge that we already have. And also the creation of an EU-wide framework for enhancing the quality and transparency of non-financial reporting, and also by measuring and managing the corporate diversity and inclusion strategies more effectively. So, well, we invite all the stakeholders connected today to think how transversal disability is in your organization. Thank you so much. This was the presentation of the report. I hope there will be some additional questions later on. And well, now it's time to the challenges and, the progress towards an inclusive non-financial reporting framework. I give the floor to Thijs to present their so interesting roundtable. Thank you, Thijs.
Thank you, Teresa. Very interesting presentation, and well, basically setting the scene for the discussion of today. But in the next segment, we will go a little bit zoom out a little bit and look a bit broader to the NFRD revision process. And we are delighted, GRI and also our friends from Fundación ONCE and the D-Hub, to have this excellent panel today with the representation of the European Commission, of an EFRAG task force member, and Patricia Reverter from KPMG Spain. We will get to that later. First, I want to jump immediately to our first guest, representing the European Commission. Are you already online? Elena. Elena Palomek is member of the non-financial reporting team at DJ FISMA, and she will share with us the latest updates on the revision process of the NFRD. And she has some slides for that. So please, Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thijs. Good morning, everyone. Very pleased to share with you my views on the revision of the NFRD. To give an overview of the NFRD, let's start with some important points of the current situation. The non-financial reporting directive was agreed in 2014 as an amendment to the accounting directive. It required some large companies to include a non-financial statement as part of their annual public reporting obligations. And companies under the scope had to apply for the first time since 2018. I will mention just a few characteristics. Let's say that the NFRD currently applies to large listed companies and large banks and insurance companies, listed or not listed, providing that they have more than 500 employees. Moreover, the NFRD identifies 4 sustainability issues: environment, social and employee, human rights, anti-bribery, and corruption. And regarding these 4 sustainability issues, it requires company to disclose information on 5 business concepts, including business model, policies, outcomes, risks, and KPIs. Next slide, please. Yeah. So why do we need to revise the NFRD? The public consultation that on the revision of the NFRD has confirmed that the current situation of the non-financial information does not meet the needs of users and preparers. From the user perspective, and being users, not only investors, but also civil society organizations, users say that some company from which they need non-financial information, they do not report at all. And companies that do report don't disclose all relevant information needed by users. Moreover, the information, the non-financial information, is not comparable between companies and is not reliable, especially in comparison with the financial information. And finally, there are also problems of accessibility and usability of this information, mainly because the non-financial information is not digitalized. As a consequence of these problems, investors cannot consider enough sustainability risk and opportunity in their investment decisions, and civil society organizations cannot hold companies accountable for their impact on people and on environment. Besides these problems for users, there are also problems for preparers. Many companies find difficult to know exactly what information they have to disclose to meet user needs and legal requirements. Moreover, they have to respond to additional information requests addressed by ESG data provider, for example. As a consequence, they spend many time, energy, resources doing its reporting, and that means more cost and administrative burden for reporting companies. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what are the possible solutions that we are considering? First, it's important to say that there is not a final decision on the content of the legislative proposal. But at this stage, we are considering some modification of the NFRD to address the identified problems. We are considering, for example, to expand the scope of the NFRD and to include all large companies, listed or not listed, and to remove the threshold of 500 employees and to 250 employees. We are also considering to introduce an audit requirement of the non-financial information to improve the reliability. And finally, regarding the content of the non-financial information, we think that to improve, to give clarity and certainty to companies on what information they have to disclose, we will use EU mandatory standards. In this respect, a possible outcome of the process will be to revise some provisions of the NFRD and to develop an EU non-reporting standard for non-financial reporting standard for companies. And in this respect, the Vice President Dombrovskis has issued a mandate to EFRAG to start preparatory works for the development of an EU non-financial reporting standard. After this mandate, a new task force has been created, and over the last month has been working to deliver some final recommendations that I hope the member of the task force will explain in more detail. So, as I say, these mandatory EU standards are at the core of the revision. And regarding the introduction of explicit mention to disability, of course, we are not taking a final decision, but and we don't know exactly how it will be. But the disability is a very important issue among social issues, and we are taking and looking at it very carefully. So, for next slide, yes. To finish, just to give you some figures on the possible timing of the process, the non-financial directive, and always in the case that the outcome of this process is to the adoption of EU standards. As I said, the Commission will adopt a legislative proposal in April 2021, most probably, and later, co-legislator, European Parliament and Council will start their negotiation, and they will reach an agreement on a level 1 test, probably in the first half of 2022. We think that the first set of standards will be ready for mid-2022, and the Commission will adopt this standard by a delegated act at the end of 2022. And in this way, companies will publish their first report according to a standard on 2024. The adoption of a level 2 standard by the end of 2022 is only possible if the development of a standard begins in parallel to negotiation on the level 1 legislation. Thank you. I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Elena Palomeque, for these insights. May I remind everyone that you can upvote questions in the Q&A, and also the panelists can maybe answer a few questions directly live in the Q&A already, while the others are still speaking. There are some interesting questions already. I'm going to move very fast now to David Vermeijs, and we're very pleased to have him on the panel today, because he's not only senior advisor at Shift Project, but he has also been representing the broader perspective of civil society and human rights in these the already mentioned European task force, the EFRAG Lab Project Task Force, to be precise, that will issue its advice as we hear next Friday, but maybe David can tell something about it. David, please update us on what your work has been on the task force and where we're standing. Please open your video also, David.
Can you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Great. So thank you very much, Thijs, and Elena as well for setting that up wonderfully. So indeed, I am David Vermeijs, a senior advisor with Shift. Shift is a non-profit organization dedicated to the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and we work with governments, states, NGOs, unions, investors, and others on the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles. Of course, UN Guiding Principles and human rights is particularly focused on those that are put in the most vulnerable positions by business. And as the largest minority group, this explicitly includes people with a disability, including through the reference to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I just want to just share a quick anecdote. I often travel to countries to work with businesses on workshops to identify their salient human rights issues. And when we discuss and raise the issues around persons with disabilities, we often get the reaction that that's not an issue for us. We don't have them in our company. And of course, that's precisely the problem that we need to address and that we need to change. And of course, this doesn't only concern persons with a disability. There's other minorities, but the level of change needed is still the same. And this is the reason, indeed, that we do this work and that we focus, including on reporting, because that, of course, provides a level of accountability to the external world, facilitates engagement with critical stakeholders, and if done correctly and robustly, helps companies to reflect on their performance and to improve it in the service of more positive and better outcomes for people and planet. So this is why we as an organization have worked together with Mazars to develop a specific framework for companies to report on how they can meet their human rights responsibilities, and have worked with GRI indeed to reflect those principles and concepts in its human rights and universal standards. And this has also been the reason for us to take up this position in the project task force that Elena and Thijs talked about, that is meant to prepare the work of the future, hopefully future European sustainability reporting standard setter. Now, our report is indeed officially going to be submitted tomorrow and will likely come out in a number of days, hopefully before the end of the month. So I hope you'll appreciate that I don't have slides, but I'm very happy to share a few of the elements of the likely report that I think is going to be particularly helpful in providing hooks and entry points for this very important focus on persons with a disability. I think one of those elements that you'll see in our work is that there is a very strong reference and call to apply consistent alignment with international standards, including the UN Guiding Principles, the OECD guidelines, ILO standards, indeed the SDGs. And through these focus on international standards, related standards and concerns on persons with a disability, and indeed, of course, very similar and critical alignment with EU regulations and policies. I think secondly, what the report will highlight is a critical clarification on the concept of double materiality, which is really a critically unique feature of the non-financial reporting directive. And this really means that both impacts on people and the environment by a company and also how that sustainability, how sustainability matters affect enterprise value. So those two lenses, those two aspects of double materiality are highlighted. And the report recognizes that companies currently often tend to focus on the overlap of those two rather than the full slate of impacts and risks. And this is what the report explicitly speaks to. And I think this clarification is going to be critical for people with a disability, because often it's not easy to make just a business case for it. There needs to be a broader discussion about diversity and inclusion and so forth, also from the perspective of affected stakeholders. And this goes to my next point, which is that the report will very much highlight the importance of what it's called an inclusive range of stakeholders, and it makes a very conscious distinction between affected stakeholders and users of reporting, and recognizes that those whose rights are more likely to be impacted may not necessarily be those with the loudest voice or the strongest impact on the company's bottom line. So the companies will need to assess impacts and define impact materiality thresholds based on the relative severity of impact on people, indeed including and throughout the value chain, as was discussed earlier, and not just on who the companies decides to ask for whatever reason. And this means that I think people at increased risk of vulnerability should get higher priority than before in reporting. Indeed, if our recommendations would be followed on. I think what I'll just finally highlight is that there will be, in a number of ways and throughout the report, a focus on the critical elements of what I would call quality of information and guidelines for targets. And to summarize the point there is just that, when a future sustainability reporting standard is going to incorporate indicators, which was talked about, to make sure that those indicators are going to be truly reflecting and providing positive incentives as well as positive information that truly focuses on the perspectives of the affected stakeholders, including persons with disability. And the quality of those indicators is going to have to be assessed, that goal is going to be achieved by the future work of the standard setter. So let me leave it there and hand it back to Thijs. Thank you, Thijs.
Thank you, David. Excellent time management also, and thank you for your insights also in the aspects of your your normal job with Shift, because it's really great to have Shift as a partner, as a friend, fighting for getting human rights as a fundamental, integral part of corporate reporting. And as many of you will know, GRI, apart from pioneering sustainability reporting in general, the GRI standards are the only standards that already align with the UN guiding principles, but will even do more so with our update of the universal standards. So we hope to have a critical contribution also to that on the European level, because I think Europe will need some of these standards at least to get credible and quality reporting, as you said, David, on track in the mandatory reporting requirements. Let's move to the third panelist. I'm very pleased to introduce her, Patricia Reverter from KPMG Spain, and she will particularly focus on also the Spanish situation as an example of I think a great example of current developments in still mainly voluntary sustainability reporting, but it will certainly give an insight in the future of possible mandatory reporting requirements imposed by the European Union in the near future. So Patricia, please present us your slides, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thijs. First of all, thank you to the Disability Hub and Fundación ONCE and GRI for inviting me. In fact, my presentation is focusing on the Spanish situation, but before starting, I want to make a call regarding our latest report. The KPMG, as you probably know, is publishing every 2 years the current status of non-financial reporting from a global perspective. Next slide, please. In this regard, if you put the next slide, in this regard, this survey published in December 2020 is really a big survey, because we have assessed more than 5,000 entities around the world regarding their non-financial reporting. As you can see, it is really now a global practice to issue non-financial information within the management reports or in a report aside of the management report. Nevertheless, it is important to mention that in Europe, probably because of the non-financial European Directive publication, we find much more entities than in other regions. But it is now mainstream for big companies to issue non-financial reports according to their own legislations or in a voluntary basis. A part of this, and our report assesses 10 focus areas, which already have been mentioned by other speakers here. First of all, the non-financial reporting according to legislation in different countries, but the materiality is one of the focus areas that this report assess. Materiality from this double perspective have been assessed, and also SDG contributions, climate change from the mitigation and adaptation perspective, the protection of biodiversity, which is in fact something that it's going to be relevant in the following years, also for the board's agenda. Labor practices, where we assess here how is the transparency regarding all these issues that you already mentioned, gender pay gap, current practices regarding contracts and quality of employment, training, but also accessibility or disability when it is disclosed. Ethics, integrity, and good governance is also another focus areas. So socioeconomic impact in terms of how companies are creating value in the society. Supply chain, regarding how the value creation and the responsible purchasing practices are in fact being part of this non-financial reporting, and tax transparency as part of the new areas that are now in this kind of reports. Regarding the Spanish focus, this report has a zoom on the Spain because of this huge implementation according to the non-financial European directive. In fact, we have assessed the 100 biggest companies of Spain, according to revenues, and 85% of these companies have already published this non-financial information report. The other 40% did not publish in Spain because it's published by their parent companies, and only 1% did not publish. We have to mention that non-financial reports can be separate or included into the management report, but what is really relevant is that the Spanish law applies to companies with more than 500 employees, not only big companies, listed ones, or public interest entities, but all of the companies that have more than 500 employees. And what is more relevant is from this year, this Spanish legislation is applying for companies with more than 250. So it will be much more broader, the scope of the non-financial information in Spain. Regarding the next slide, as it is already mentioned and following the European directive, companies should disclose their business model and their governance model and the impacts of their business model into the society. They should disclose how they identify risks and opportunities on ESG issues according to stakeholder engagement and regarding their sustainability context. Policies and procedures they have in place to address all these issues and the results of these policies and procedures, and also disclosing KPIs. And the KPIs are already mentioned in this legislation. So if you pass to the following slide, you will see that it is mandatory in Spain not only disclose the management approach and to identify some KPIs that could help, but the KPIs are more or less mandatory and stated by this legislation. In this regard, you have to disclose specific indicators in terms of pollution, circular economy, waste and water, climate change, minimization and adaptation. Regarding human resources, the kind of contracts, the number of hours training, indicators regarding diversity and gender pay gap, and indicators regarding accessibility and disability. In consumers, also consumer protection, a number of complaints, and disability regarding consumer is also mentioned because you have to talk, disclose about accessibility, yeah? Also purchasing policies and ESG criteria to assess suppliers, societal impact, tax transparency with the country-by-country report, and regarding corruption and anti-bribery, policies adopted, and also the amount that you, as a company, pay regarding non-for-profit organizations.
Can you come to an end, Patricia? Because then we have some time for questions.
Yeah, it is also important mandatory assurance, which is really relevant because as audit firms, we have worked together with the institution in order to arrive to a guidance that help the practitioners to get to an assurance like the audit financial assurance, but in a limited assurance and with the perspective for the non-financial information. And this has come to 94% of these companies had the assurance report within the non-financial report. And finally, if you pass through the other, the frameworks that are most commonly used is, of course, GRI, as the legislation already mentioned GRI as a framework, but there are other standards that also are used in combination with GRI, like for example, SASB or A8000. And the final presentation, the final slide is regarding that also SDGs are addressed, most commonly the climate action and the decent work.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for these great insights. We are a little bit over time for this segment, but I want to reward the most upvoted question and go back specifically to Elena and David for a brief comment. Maria Carvalho asks, will the UN non-financial reporting standards be aligned with GRI standards, or for that matter, other frameworks? Because there was also another question asking about the methodology that already exists in other reporting standards. Elena, can you briefly comment on that?
Well, I think that David has mentioned already this question, but we know that there is some concern on this question of compatibility of possible EU standard with other initiatives. We must say that from the beginning, the Dombrovskis mandate explicitly said that the new EU non-financial reporting standard should build on existing initiatives and frameworks, and that we know that are in the market, the financial market are global, and we don't want to fragment to further fragmentate them. Yeah. And this was on our agenda for the beginning, and at the same time, we know that the European situation has some specificities. We want the sustainable finance agenda has a very ambitious goal. The timing is short, and we need also a solution to make a coherence with all the EU framework on sustainable finance.
Yes.
So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Elena. David, maybe you can build briefly on that.
Yeah, just very briefly. So obviously, to your earlier point, Thijs, GRI and some of the other standards mentioned have already been, attempting to align with international standards. So some of that convergence is happening as we speak. And of course, as a task force, we took very close note of the work by the 5 standard setters, including GRI, IIRC, SASB, and CDSB, and others. And we took very close note to that, and wherever we could, we build on that work and refer to it explicitly in the report. And there is a very close, I think what we call building block to continue to do that in the context of the hopefully future European sustainability reporting standard setter. And I would just note and reinforce with Elena saying that, of course, the NFRD has its own, kind of criteria and perspectives, and that would have to be continue to be adopted to my last point I made earlier in terms of, criteria around quality of indicators and just generally achieving the objectives of the NFRD.
Thank you so much, David. And I think that this is an excellent comment you made also from the perspective of companies who are already voluntarily doing much more than is required by law, because especially these companies would suffer a lot if there would be like a total overhaul of the system. So companies already voluntarily using existing standards, just like the GRI standards, would benefit from close alignment of the European standards to that. We could fill an hour with this excellent panel, but unfortunately we don't have the time for that. I saw David already answering some questions in the Q&A, so I will also hop on and do that. And maybe Elena and Patricia, you can also comment a little bit on some of the questions asked. Patricia, thank you also very much for your last slide, in particular because assurance is a much overlooked topic, and especially also the required skills to assure sustainability reporting are different from assuring financial reporting. So I'm sure we will get to discuss that also with the European Commission in the near future. And thank you, Elena, for your insights. Good luck with the work with your team on the revision process. And David, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And looking forward to continue our collaboration with you. Thank you so much. And I give over to Teresa.
Hey, thank you so much, Thijs. That was really, really interesting. It is a pity that we don't have much time to overview all these interesting issues. But now it is my pleasure to present to this second roundtable, which is for me my honor and my pleasure to present today Inmaculada Plasencia, which is she's the senior expert of social affairs, disability and inclusion unit at the European Commission. We also have with us Hayden Hammersley, social policy officer at the European Disability Forum, Leticia Novak, international diversity and inclusion manager at L'Oréal, and José Luis Blasco, a global sustainability director at Acciona. So welcome all of you to this roundtable. I would like to start by maybe making some questions. I would like to ask you to open your camera to answer, and maybe we can start that conversation like this. Inmaculada, what do you think? What are, in your opinion, the key challenges and opportunities to promote more disability-inclusive businesses and the role of disability-related aspects in the non-financial information? What do you think, Inmaculada?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Yes?
Clear and loud. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so good. So good morning,
Morning.
everybody. Well, I think that to answer this question, we need to look to businesses and companies from a double perspective. We need to look into on one hand, their workforce. And when I mean the workforce, is not only the employees but also the managers. People really working in the company at all levels, and the diversity of this workforce. In that context, we need to look into measures that relate to accommodating flexibility to accommodate persons with disabilities, but also to be prepared in advance by having a basic layer at least of accessibility into their buildings, their information, their networks, their intranets, all the systems that would allow then that when persons with disabilities join the companies or when employees acquire disabilities would be able to use and to work in that in those environments. So this would be one aspect. One aspect that would provide a lot of opportunities to make the businesses more inclusive. The other element would be looking at the disability inclusiveness and accessibility of the subject matter of the business of this company, whether it's going to be delivering services, or it's going to be delivering products or manufacturing products, or both. It is really important that the way in which the company does its work, it's containing elements to address disability inclusiveness and accessibility. It starts about identifying the elements of the products of the services. It continues with assigning responsibilities, identifying the standards. It continues with establishing and involving a dialogue and involving persons with disabilities in the design, in the development, in the testing of processes, and of course in the reporting and providing information. I think that's when information about these two aspects of companies are going to be made available and being raised awareness about it, there would be really an opportunity for other companies that are not so advanced maybe to learn and to advance in making their own companies, businesses more disability inclusive. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Inmaculada. So it is clear that accessibility to make the businesses more inclusive is one of the key challenges that we have, and hopefully reporting will be not only enhancing this transparency, but also making the business to think about what they really have to improve and perform to make their environment more inclusive for all the employees. Thank you so much. Okay, great. I would like to ask Hayden Hammersley if you are here and can show up, please.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello,
Can you see me?
How are you? Yes,
I'm very well, thanks.
Clear and loud. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have a question for you, Hayden. What are the key messages as regards promoting disability inclusive businesses, and how do you see non-financial reporting could help in the process? What is your perspective about that, Hayden?
Well, yeah, thank you very much. It's a very good question. I think Inmaculada has already said so much that could be said in response to this question. I think some of the key messages to take away are with regards to how employers offer reasonable accommodation adjustments for their employees with disabilities in order to enable people to do their jobs to the best of their ability and to improve the quality of employment for persons with disabilities. So, I mean, making a business inclusive is really about ensuring that it fits around the requirements of the employees and that it allows them to do the job, of course, to the best of their abilities. And when it comes to persons with disabilities, naturally, sometimes these requirements can be quite specific. However, the fact that they are specific doesn't mean that the adjustments are necessarily difficult to make. They can be quite easy, and they can also be inexpensive or indeed free. So when we talk about adjustments and reasonable accommodation, we use the term reasonable accommodation, and indeed investing in making workplaces inclusive is definitely a reasonable investment. It's a reasonable thing to do to ensure that people can work on an equal basis with others. Normally, this kind of inclusion, the first step in the process is really a simple one. It's just to sit down with the employee with a disability, and discuss with them what their requirements are in order to be able to do their job. The solutions can be as simple as having, flexible working hours to avoid the rush hour commute, or having maybe more time to attend medical appointments. It can be any number of reasons, and it will change entirely depending on the individual. It can also be things such as being able to occasionally work from home, which was once considered something very difficult to accept for employers, but now, of course, we're seeing that it's something very easy to implement, and it can be very effective. Reasonable accommodation can sometimes require the employer to invest in things such as reasonable assistive technology, or maybe adapting the physical accessibility of a workplace. In most member states, and it's the case here in Belgium, usually public funds are made available to support employers. But of course, it's always a good practice for companies to foresee some budget to be able to make these changes quickly before any state subsidies come in. And then, it's also about giving employees the opportunity to progress in their career, to be trained. No employee is expected to stagnate at work. They should be able to seek a different job description in line with their interests, to progress, to move up pay scales, and they should definitely be supported in this. This is also part of being inclusive. Now, the big question, and I'll try to be brief, you ask about how the non-financial reporting can assist in this process. Well, the short answer is that it can really do a lot. It's definitely something that will encourage companies to think ahead about just how their activities and workplace practices allow for the inclusion of workers with disabilities, and to make changes ahead of time to ensure that they meet their targets. The reporting is useful in several ways. Firstly, it gives a very clear message to employers about what is expected in the areas of inclusion. If there are no strict requirements on things such as how you're accommodating for your workers with disabilities, then it sends out the message to employers that it's not really something crucial for them and that they don't need to take it into account. Especially for employers in member states where there aren't things such as diversity quotas for businesses, the notion of inclusion in employment could be completely off their radar. So it's really firstly important for making them aware that this is something we expect of them. And then also it gives a sense of accountability. Businesses like to achieve their targets, and if they don't achieve the targets set out for them, it's seen as a failure on their part, and it holds them accountable, and it can be a sort of source of embarrassment if they don't live up to inclusion requirements or expectations. The final thing I'd like to say is that it's not so much, I think something to bear in mind when we talk about this non-financial reporting on inclusion of workers with disabilities is that it's not supposed to be a way of forcing employers to do something which is against their interest. It's really the opposite. It's about making them aware of how things need to be done differently sometimes to include employees with disabilities, and actually opening up the possibility they have to find new talent and knowledge, maybe among areas of the population that they hadn't sort of been tapping before. So essentially, when employers are able to open up to a more diverse workforce, then everyone wins. And this is the message that we would like to get across.
Great. Thank you so much, Hayden. I think you posed a very interesting point of view. And it is about stakeholder inclusion while reporting as well, because you mentioned when you really know the needs of your employees, when you put this in the center of the design for services and products, the employee probably you will have a better final service or good. So I think this is also a very relevant principle of GRI about reporting, which is please consider the stakeholders while you are building your messages within your report. Great, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I would like to now to leave the word to Leticia Novak. We have with us the International Diversity and Inclusion Manager at L'Oréal. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, Leticia. How are you doing?
Hello, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Okay, great. So I also have a question for you, Leticia. What do you say, what are the key challenges and opportunities and the best practices from L'Oréal? I think all of us, we have many things to learn from you and your organization. What are the opportunities to promote more disability inclusive businesses? What is the importance of disability in non-financial information from your point of view, Leticia?
Thank you for this question, and thank you for the opportunity to partake on this very important webinar. It's a pleasure. So L'Oréal has been committed to the topic of disability inclusion for more than 20 years, actually, beginning of the 90s. So it's a long-term commitment that started actually here in France, and then slowly but surely we started scaling up to other European countries and then worldwide. At the beginning, we were much focused on recruitment and, of course, integrating new employees with disabilities. So just what our colleague just mentioned about the reasonable adjustments and accommodations, so employees with disability could come and work at their very best. But later on, actually, we understood that the disability inclusion topic was much broader than only recruitment. And that's exactly where I want to talk about opportunities. So we understood that actually, okay, recruitment for sure was key, but creating an inclusive environment so employees with disabilities that haven't yet come to us and disclose about their disability could be able to do so in a safe and inclusive environment. So we started shifting a little bit the work on creating this inclusive environment through many actions. So one of the key actions was actually promoting an international competition, which we baptize Disability Awards. So countries could learn from each other experience, not only on the topic of recruitment, but the topic of inclusion. So how to create this inclusive environment so our employees could be safe and come and talk to their managers about their disability. This was one of the opportunities that we saw. Another opportunity that I would like to mention, it is actually towards the leadership team. So in order for us to create this inclusive environment, our leaders and our managers needs to know what actually are the key roles and responsibilities of the leadership team to lead the teams with more inclusivity. So this means at the very bottom to be more respectful, to value each other's, and of course, by doing that, you will create this mutual respect environment where employees will be safe and come to disclose about their disability and other diversity and inclusion related topics. So this, I think, today is key, onboarding the leadership teams and getting them accountable of their roles in terms of raising this inclusive environment. So I think those are, the opportunities that L'Oréal saw along the way, along this very long journey of commitment to disability inclusion. Regarding the non-financial performance, I think there are things that are very, very important. When companies start disclosing their work on diversity and inclusion, and more specifically on disability inclusion, of course, this gives transparency to people outside the company, investors, to future employees, to future consumers. And of course, they will get to know your work, a work that it has nothing to do with your brands, with your main core of business. And actually, this has to do with the responsibility of the company to give it back to society. So I think this is key. And we are seeing a movement of more and more companies today wanting to disclose about their work on diversity and inclusion topics. And I think this is definitely a trend that will come to stay. Mm-hmm. I think I've answered the question. So
I think so. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting point of view, and definitely to normalize, this disability within a business and to be very stick to your core business is key, because this is really something strategic. And now it is my pleasure to introduce José Luis Blasco, the Global Head of Sustainability at Acciona, and really, really expert on all these issues. So welcome, José Luis.
Hello, Teresa. Nice to see you again. Thank you for inviting me.
Fantastic, great. I think you have some presentation that you would like to share with all the attendees. But maybe while you are putting your presentation, let me ask you a question. What are the key challenges and opportunities and the best practices from Acciona to promote more disability inclusive businesses? What is the importance of disability in non-financial information?
Please, thank you. Thank you, Teresa. I think that Leticia has developed a very similar roadmap that we had. But first of all, I want to show where we are and where are our challenges, because we have a lot of challenges. We are learning every day. Because I think that the guidelines from Fundación ONCE and GRI in 2015 was a milestone in terms of what kind of indicators do you expect, how you can translate action into information. I think that it was very, very clear, but I have the impression that at that time and now we are reporting good practices. We are reporting what good practices mean for our company, what is the could be pilots. Our problem was, okay, once we have the information, the information in order to report, what happened? How we can react to that? And then there was second challenge is how we can integrate, and we had some challenges I want to explain about what is material and what is not in terms of disability, inclusion, and diversity, because it's very relevant not only to put information into the report. The report is one vehicle with 100 indicators around your company. Maybe we need to manage this information in a more smart way. And the third thing is that how we can make a real impact in terms of change the situation, transform our companies. Where is the benefits? And let me give you a couple of insights about what we are doing and what are our challenges. Let me give me a moment in order to show. This is the graphic about the current employment rates in different countries. We have Brazil, France, Germany, Italy, different countries. The first thing that we discover is that you have the figures, if you have the reporting system, you can discover very, very interesting information about what is material in order to identify how to react to this situation. If you have a look to Brazil, you can see that the integration gap, the gap between the people who is employed and the people with disability, which is unemployed, is huge. It's huge in terms of unemployment. This is very, very, very important. But if you go to Italy, the problem is that you have higher rates of employment in the disability population. But the problem is the gender gap. The women are less representative in terms of employment rates. And if you go to Saudi Arabia, you have another completely different problem. And this is very relevant because we are not talking about reporting. Reporting is not And this is very clear that we are now, for our perspective, approaching the problem of reporting in the bad direction. This is wrong direction to report by taking into account what we are doing, the reports in the financial statements, because the financial statements are related to the investors. And sustainability cannot be only focused on the investors, because we are talking about the stakeholder capitalism, and the people is the relevant. The people is the center of the reporting of sustainability. We only focus on investors. We are always making the same mistake. I can give you this is our challenge. We have in Spain 3.8 of our total workforce is disabled, but in Saudi is zero. And this is part of our problem. If we only have the corporate figures, what we are doing, we are making only the nice to have activities. Our second problem is about the industry gap. We have activities with a lot of people that we can integrate, because the skills that we found in the market are very easy to integrate, and other activities are very difficult. The second problem is that how we can improve the profiles of availability in different sectors that are relevant in terms of the economy. You can see that in construction and financial activities that are completely different activities, with the effort and the skills that you need to work in these two sectors are completely different. We have great gaps in this sector. How we can improve to close this gap? And the second is about the barriers. How we can take this factor into account in order to mind the gap. Our response is exoskeleton and ergonomics. We are exoskeletons for this kind of heavy duties. But it's not the unique answer. I think that we are thinking about how innovation can help us in order to think about more granular data in order to act more impactful in the things that we consider irrelevant. The second challenge, very quickly, is about how we can make it more impactful in terms of the opportunity, how we are impactful in terms of, we call it regenerative infrastructure. This is a project in Madrid in partnership with Norman Foster and Panes. Is close to be finished in 1 year. We developed a 7 aspect of design effective regenerative infrastructure, that how we can, learning from inclusion, we are making better infrastructure, flexible in use, low physical effort, tolerance for error, because with the design minimize hazards and adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions, perceptible information in terms of equitable use, 7 different things, 7 things that give us the opportunity to make better projects. And this is relevant in terms of connected dots. And finally, in the roadmap, we think that all companies probably are taking into account, from measurement to materiality and granularity, is very relevant in terms of what is important and where is important, to the positive contribution connecting with the rest of the picture. And finally, I want to show you that this double materiality that our colleague David was pointed out at the beginning of the first session is very relevant for us, because this double materiality is not only about the impact of the company in the society, it's also how the risks are assessed in the company. I want to show you that the diversity and inclusion index of Refinitiv is showing that the companies who perform better in these kind of things outperform 35% better than their peers. And I think that this is a real good news in terms of the double materiality approach works. If you make an impact, you are making your business better. And at the end of the day, your things improve. And this is the case study that we want to show. Thank you, Teresa.
Great, thank you so much, Jose Luis. Really interesting. What a pity that we only have a couple of minutes left. But there's an interesting question that I would like to raise to Inmaculada. As someone was asking about, are we closer to some standardized disclosures about disability in general terms?
Well, let me make very clear that I am not going to comment on what could be standardized or, let's say, harmonized by the directive. My colleague has already presented to you the state of place, or the state of play of this information to be disclosed. Is a process, and I would not comment on it. So outside the directive, what we see, without even mentioning the directive, what we see is that indeed the more awareness raising that it is, the more information that is available, the more activity it triggers, that the more mutual learning. What we see is that worldwide there is more demand to get to know more what is happening in relation to disability in companies. I think that the convention, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and its very successful ratification by almost all countries around the world. I mean, there is a small group still missing, but it has been very successful. Has really raised the visibility of disability matters. It has put disability higher up in the agenda, and it is, if you want to refer to the harmonization, it has, let's say, or it's working as a catalyst for harmonizing the language used on disability towards a more human rights-based approach, and raising a number of issues like, you know, accessibility and rights in the debates on the private sector, what the private sector is doing. So this is as far as I could go without commenting on you know, the
Great
process in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inmaculada. Yeah, I would like also to thank you, Jose Luis, Leticia, Hayden. This has been wonderful. I wish we could have an hour longer, but I'm afraid we will come to the end, and I would like to give the floor to Fernando Riaño, who is going to close this interesting webinar. He's the Director of Institutional Relations and Social Responsibility at ONCE Social Group. So please, Fernando, if you are somewhere here,
yes,
you can continue. Thank you so much, Fernando.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your invitation. For ONCE Social Group, that brings together ONCE, the ONCE Foundation, its social companies, Ilunion. This type of action is a priority, and well, we are an engine for the labor inclusion of people with disabilities, but an engine is nothing without wheels and without other gears. That's the reason. That's why society as whole must accompany us in this task, in this objective, and this objective is for all. And in the same way, for us, sustainability as a global concept includes all the areas where a company, an organization has an impact on society, and the environment, of course, social, of course, on who should be the first convinced top managers through corporate governance, and it's a great impact in terms of decisions, in terms of strategy, and it's therefore a top-down effect and vice versa. Okay, our commitment with sustainability is undoubted, but we have to convince and have many more companies, the business community, entities and organizations of society in this project, collaborating in this objective, in this task, so that labor inclusion of people with disabilities is normalized. Well, thank you all for your contributions and participation, for your work. I would not like to close this webinar without highlighting some issues, the most relevant from our point of view. And I would like to comment, well, the way companies interact with society, what was previously called corporate social responsibility, is no longer voluntary. It's mandatory, and they must also report what they do and how they do it and with whom they do it. This great impact and great work. We must value the alliance with the European Social Fund to promote the labor inclusion of people with disabilities and support projects such as Disability Hub, in which good practices and with great examples are supported to normalize inclusion, that companies are diverse, and is the society in which they operate in our day-by-day and in our agenda. Sustainability, as previously understood, is not an environmentally focused issue. It's about putting the person at the center in their environment, and therefore underlining the social dimension of sustainability. We are talking about social impact, and social impact is in the agenda. And highlight the potential of non-financial information to improve the transparency and performance of organizations, and the importance of reflecting a broad perspective of diversity, including, of course, disability, and including the perspective, the idea, the concept around disability. If we are talking about disability, ability of people with disabilities is more important than disability. All this transparency and performance of organization will positively impact in terms of reputation and what this means in market positioning, fundraising, and investors who are increasingly concerned about how companies interact with their societies, which is very important in terms of agenda, in terms of impact and perception about society. I'm talking about customers too, of course. And of course, thanks to GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, for its work, which today is a world benchmark, and for the webinar, Maria Tusi sure has already done it. I would also like to do it again one more time. And of course, thank you to all my colleagues, all the speakers, your commitment to a society that does not leave anyone behind. Thank you very much, and thank you very much again, Teresa.